And welcome everyone to another IR Magazine Best Practice interview for the Awards Canada 2020. Delighted to be joined by Brian Christie, the VP of Investor Relations for Agnico Eagle Mines. Brian, really good to see you.
Good to see you too, Laurie.
It's a shame we're not doing this in person as we often have in previous years, either in Canada or at a global forum, but obviously the world has changed quite a lot in 2020. And I wonder how you would characterize it so far from an IR perspective.
It's been a challenging year for Agnico. We had some technical issues with three of our large mines in February when we reported our fourth quarter results from last year. And certainly that was a challenge. And then we were hit with the pandemic. We had at one point 7 of our 8 operating mines closed down due to COVID-19. So that made it very challenging from an operational perspective. Certainly since February, we've been doing a lot of virtual marketing and trying to get the message out. We believe that we would be able to fix the operational issues, which we subsequently did. But it's been an active time on the IR road.
Certainly not a time to shut up shop and be quiet. I wonder if you could tell me a little bit more about the challenges facing the mining sector, particularly in Canada, because I imagine mine closures is up there as a somewhat contentious issue to navigate. Was that something that was pretty universal at the beginning of COVID-19 outbreak?
Actually, it's kind of interesting because most of the closures impacted, I would say, first world countries. Like Agnico, we operate typically in Canada, Mexico, and Europe, which you would deem as generally pretty good locations, low risk politically. But with the COVID, things started early here in Canada. We were shut down. We ultimately had to send our Nunavut workforce home. And we had to isolate the mining operations. So that was a challenge. We lost probably 20 to 25% of our workforce in Nunavut. And then just not long after that, Quebec was hit with a closure. Some of the provincial governments deemed mining non-essential. It was interesting, Quebec, it was non-essential. Ontario, it was still essential. So that was a bit of a challenge. So we had to basically put our mines on care and maintenance and adjust there. And then ultimately we brought the Quebec operations back, and then Mexico decided that they were going to shut down mining operations across the country. The one interesting thing here was our Finnish mine, Kittilä. That was our first location for having an actual COVID case. And the mine only shut down for 3 days and has continued to operate the entire time. So it's kind of an interesting dynamic that, some countries shut operations down. Other countries, although they didn't shut things down, certainly saw reduced throughput based on COVID. So it was a challenging time, I think, globally. And I think a lot of the countries that didn't shut down early are now seeing higher cases as we go through the year.
Certainly seems that way. And a lot still to work out on the powers that be, let's put it that way. Still uncertain. But you mentioned that there's been, equally a busy year for IR. In light of that, have you had to expand what you're doing much in light of this? I'm sure online events has been an area where you've kind of improved your presence, but have you had to kind of augment what is probably usually a busy calendar?
I would say no. I think what's interesting with Agnico, we've had a very active IR program, as you well know, for probably 15 or 20 years. So for us, we were kind of fortunate that we'd laid all the groundwork with the investors. We're always out marketing globally. And so it was fairly easy to move to a virtual platform. And in fact, in some ways easier, because we could cover multiple time zones in the same day. Like we could have a call in Europe the same time as we had one in Vancouver. And so we didn't have to worry about, the the challenges of getting on airplanes, moving from city to city. So in that sense, it has its benefits, but I think investors still would ultimately like to see people in person.
Yes, certainly never going to completely replace that. And when it comes to, particularly communicating around, the mine closures and some of that, there's differences from country to country. Were there any particular ways in which you reached out to investors with that information? Was that just a case of kind of, calling round and updating folks, or did you have something different?
We started right away as soon as the very first closures started. We reached out first to our top 50 shareholders to see if they wanted a call to be updated. And then from there, we basically went out regionally. So over the course of the pandemic, we've done typically the various cities in Canada. New York is a big one. Europe, certainly, we've been in multiple jurisdictions there. We attended the Denver Gold Forum that normally is live in Zurich. That went virtual this year. So that was something that was a little bit different. But I'd say overall, the response from investors has been good.
Glad to hear. Certainly, something that trades on, I'm sure, that relationship you've built up over, like you say, a long and active IR program. Has it been a little bit easier to find time with senior management? I know that, you have a really good relationship with Sean and David, and you guys obviously work as a unit, but without having to drag them onto a plane ever so often. Perhaps is there a bit more scope to get them in front of investors at a time like this?
It's interesting because the one person you kind of miss there is our president, Amar El-Jundi, who actually does a lot of the marketing as well. So I'm fortunate that I can bring out my CEO, my president, my CFO, and certainly I think generally with, we still have to handle operational activities, but certainly there probably has been more time for virtual meetings. And as I said, we've been doing Asia starting at 7 o'clock at night Toronto time and going well into 11 p.m. Toronto time. And then Europe, we usually start that in the morning to link up with investors in the afternoon. So certainly it does have some logistical challenges, but I think it's been pretty easy to work around.
Glad to hear. Like I say, again, testament to having that a lot of stuff in place already. Speaking of ESG, is obviously something that's been, I think, several teams have told us, IR Magazine, is something that's really been highlighted a bit more at the current time, whether that's purely around the S and matters relating to employees and keeping them safe and stakeholders like that, or just that it's maybe refocused attentions a little bit. And like I say, that's something I know Agnico have taken pretty seriously for a long time, and you have your sustainable development reports and similar. Have you found that there's been more interested from investors, or similarly the kind of current economic climate has, just trying to say too many ESG words at once there, has cast a new light on some of those factors?
What's interesting about ESG is, I would say probably about 3 years ago, I would have struggled to get our head of ESG in front of investors. There virtually wasn't a lot of interest. It would be, the odd meeting, mostly probably in Europe. But certainly over the last couple of years, we've seen that picking up. And I would say investors are largely interested in greenhouse gas emissions, water usage, and tailings became a very, very large issue, especially after a couple of the incidents in Brazil. But, we've been working hard. I would say 3 years ago, we wouldn't have had an ESG slide in our deck. Now we've got multiple slides, and we continue to build on, changing that out, improving the messaging. So we're working hard on it. And I think it's it's kind of interesting because I think some ways mining companies get a bad rap for ESG because, to your point, we've been producing sustainability reports for years. And certainly, if you don't have high regard for the environment and the communities in which you operate, then you really don't have social license to be mining. So you have to be a good corporate citizen across the board. And, as you said, us and a lot of companies have been doing this for years and doing a very good job at it.
Yeah, certainly it's interesting to see. Those headlines, even in lockdowns, of like as you mentioned, failures are really still shine out at the moment. So no, seems like the right course of action. But maybe speaking more generally, you mentioned then that the kind of changes to your travel schedule are, maybe something that would evolve into a bit of a hybrid approach. We've heard that from a lot of people going ahead. Do you think, some of these changes to your program will stick when it comes to, I'm thinking of travel particularly, but more generally, is there anything you think you'll take into the longer term here?
I think, operating out of the office, that's going to change. We're currently back in our office, but we only have probably about 10 or 20% of the workforce in, and that's usually for a couple of days of the week. So I think there may be more working from home because we've certainly demonstrated the ability, especially with virtual marketing, that can pretty much happen anywhere that you have a good internet connection. So for sure, the travel has been impacted, and I'm not sure when that will change. We have a company travel ban that I can't get to the sites, and certainly we have limited access for visitors to come to the site. If somebody has to come for a technical issue, then that's something we would do. But I think, though, moving ahead, investors do want that face-to-face contact with management, because I think ultimately they want to maybe meet the management for the first time. It's okay that we're talking on a video, but I think you have to sit in the room and stare management across the table before you probably make an investment decision. So I think it'll become a mixture of some people will be fine with virtual meetings and other people will probably want to meet management. And I think where it's going to be important is in the gold sector, we're seeing the resurgence of generalist investors. So they're new to the space, and I think they're going to want to meet management, especially if it's for the first time. So I think we're going to have to ultimately get back on airplanes when the time is right, and that's probably once we've got a vaccine in place. Other than that, we typically do mine tours, usually one or two every year, and I had them planned for this year, but unfortunately that didn't happen. So that's something that I think we ultimately would be back doing, especially if it's say a day trip up to Quebec or something that we can charter from Toronto, because I think it's important for both the analysts and investors to be able to see the assets and look at the projects.
Yes, certainly, and I can't imagine even a fully immersive VR experience probably wouldn't quite be the same.
It's funny, we looked at that a couple of years ago.
No.
And it was pretty cool, but to your point, it's not like you can get there and touch the rocks and see what's happening.
I mean, part of me would still be quite keen to try it, but I'm also very scared of dark spaces and heights, so it might not be a good idea. Bradley, my final question for you, and you and the team at Agnico Eagle have often been on our shortlist for awards, let alone winners of many, and you're on several of those shortlists again this year. What do you think sets apart your IR program and means that you keep getting recognized by the investment community for its excellence?
I think with IR, we basically keep it simple. You want to be in front of investors on a continual and constant basis. You can't visit a city once every 4 or 5 years and expect that when you go back, they're going to remember you and, have possibly been a shareholder over that time. So I think we constantly reach out to the investor base And that's paid off big time here, I think, with the COVID, because certainly the investors know us, and you have to continually, work the broker network. You got to get to know the analysts very well, and you also have to know the equity salespeople. I think that's something that's very important. The other thing is we have a very flexible senior management team. They all tell the same story. They, tell the same strategy. So it's pretty easy. I don't have to worry about my CEO not trusting the other members of the management group to tell the exact same story. So I've got the ability to field numerous IR teams. I can go out with senior vice presidents. We do that with the ESG, for example. So I think keep it simple. It's just, blocking and tackling and just getting the job done.
You make it sound so simple, Brad, but clearly it's the culmination of a lot of work and time. So very well done on that. And similarly, we're really looking forward to seeing you as soon as we can and as soon as circumstances allow. But until then, we'll hope you stay safe and we'll see you soon.
Thanks a lot, Laurie. Good chatting.